Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you once again to another Credit Safe webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We have a great topic and speaker today. I'm excited to get to, but before that, just a couple of quick little things. First of all, if you have questions at any point throughout this presentation, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So at the bottom of the screen, there's little text bubbles that say Q&A. Go ahead, type in your questions during that. If it's something about the webinar itself that you're having trouble hearing or something like that, I'll go ahead and answer right away, and I'll type that back to you. But if it's a question about something that's going on, I will take all of those questions at the end, put them together, and we'll ask the speaker all those questions at the end. So never fear, I have seen them. I will look at them, and we'll go ahead with that. Speaking of me, my name is Nathan Kolb. I work here in brand engagement here at Credit Safe. So want to welcome you officially to this. The other thing that I want to tell you about that beyond the questions is also that we're going to have a couple of polls going on throughout the presentation. So while our speaker is speaking and you see the slides and everything's going to be going on, you'll see a flash pop-up that'll come up and say, hey, there's a poll question. Those questions will be, there's two of them. They'll be throughout the presentation, and they're going to be open for about 2 to 3 minutes. So when you see it, if you can, please answer the question. It'll help have some engagement with this presentation, but also inform what's being said and kind of tailor this to a little bit more specifically for the audience that we have here. And speaking of this presentation and our speaker, John Powers is joining us today. He is the CEO of Credit Point Software. He's mainly responsible for the strategy, growth, and product direction at Credit Point. John joined Credit Point in late 2016 as the CEO. He was previously on the board of directors at Credit Point since 2011. He's developed a vast understanding of the order to cash market, specifically around managing the trade risk of customer portfolios and automation around onboarding, credit risk, and collections. Prior to joining Credit Point, he was the COO and co-founder of eLinks Technology, an SaaS technology startup that experienced phenomenal growth of $0 in revenue to $36 million in revenue from 2000 to 2015. And prior to eLinks, he was involved with the American Central Gas Companies as a VP of development for their midstream pipeline operations. He was on the management team that built and grew this customer base and revenue that ultimately ended up in a sale of the company for $240 million in 2004. And I could keep going on, but honestly, I just want to kind of get John in here so that we can learn from all this expertise and everything. So John, welcome to Credit Safe webinar. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate you organizing and hosting the webinar. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. I'm sure we've got people from all over the country. We work real closely with Credit Safe, and they're a great partner. So again, appreciate the opportunity to share some of the anecdotes we see out in the market. Real quick on the front end here, I just want to do a quick little overview of what we're going to talk about, a little bit about the content we're going to share, and some of the goals to see if we can't help give you some ideas on taking action, during this downturn and beyond. So hopefully it'll better equip you to understand risk now and in the future. I think a big piece of what we want to talk about is try to relate it to what we hear in the market. We talk to a lot of existing and new customers and really want to share some anecdotes and hope they resonate with some of the issues and pain points that you folks are seeing with what you're trying to do from an assessing risk and collection standpoint. And then explore ways to potentially get value now. What can you do to act today and start to develop and or improve processes that you have or that you want to start. A couple of key points we're going to touch on in the next 20 to 30 minutes are some key methodologies on how to assess risk, improve onboarding of new customers, introduce the concept of scorecards. Even if they're very, very simple, you can start small and walk before you run, but the concept of taking data and implementing scorecards to assess risk, and then explore opportunities to automate. Where are the blockers? Where are the pain points of your current process? And what chances do you have to automation, either from a system perspective or with what you're using today? And then ongoing portfolio management and segmenting risk. So of course, once you've onboarded a customer and they're existing customers and they've been doing business with you, how do you manage your portfolio? And how do you do that in an efficient manner based on sizable customer bases? And then the last two items we'll cover that can get a little bit more complex or is managing your DSO in a downturn and beyond. And then business intelligence and reporting. You know, how do you make sense of the data? Obviously, you're collecting, gathering, using all kinds of different data, both external and internal. How do you make reporting mean something? And how do you take action on the reporting and get rid of blockers and see where there's automation opportunities? So those are the items that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to move on to the next slide and talk about the first item we have here that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And I think we're also kind of launching a polling question, so you might look at that. But the theme on this slide is really getting started on how you can assess risk. I think one of the things that we hear often in the market is manual processes. How do we get rid of our manual processes, or how do we automate our manual processes, and where do we start? And it's very common to have manual processes, and they're not necessarily bad. They don't produce bad results. They produce good results in most cases. It just takes it's just manual, and it takes time, and it's time consuming. And so we hear a lot about automation of those tasks. And this is across the board. This is 20, $30 billion companies and $50 to $100 million companies. Nobody owns the patent on manual processes. One of the anecdotes we hear is it takes about 60% of an analyst's time, spent on gathering data before they even start the decisioning process. And so days and weeks can go by before you're actually approving the credit and making the sale. So I think a couple of the things we want to talk about here is how do you develop a process? How do you start now? Some examples of those items. Automation of an online credit application. A lot of you probably already have credit applications. Some of them are automated. Some of them may be on paper. When they're on paper, it takes time to gather the data. Think about it, internally. What data do you need? What data do you need to make quality decisions? And then combine and conquer. Use a variety of tools to get the whole picture. That can be a combination of credit safe business reports. That could be industry group data. That could be payment behavior. But really think about multiple ways to get data and multiple kinds of data based on your customer to get a whole picture. And that can also include payment behavior. And all these data pieces that you're gathering ultimately and hopefully will result in putting together some scorecards. And if they're manual and they're spreadsheets, that's okay. But at least you're looking at new and existing customers objectively and consistently. And I think that last word is very important, is that you're doing something on a consistent basis to start to understand your customers. Other data examples could be years in business, risk ratings, components from a credit safe report, a single high credit. So again, become familiar with the data you're gathering for scoring and what you want to use for scoring. The last couple of pieces here on this slide are around automation. Use criteria-based business rules to auto decision and auto approve if possible. You are very familiar with your customers. You probably have a pretty good idea on some of the credit limits that they're asking for. Obviously, there's outliers, but maybe you can start to develop business rules on certain amounts of credit limits based on certain scores or risk levels and lack of certain filings or lack of a bankruptcy, or there is a bankruptcy, to auto approve or auto decline or create a manual review. So you can get the process started from an automation perspective. Some of the outcomes of this slide and some of these ideas would be: sell more to your best customers, increase the speed of your sales cycle, therefore improving the customer experience, and then be able to price risk into your less creditworthy prospects. So make more money on the people that pay you slower. So those are a few of the ideas on this first slide around getting started on assessing risk. And it's really about understanding the data that you want and getting started in some form of automation. Okay,
John,
Nathan,
I'm just going to break in. Yeah, I'm going to break in here real quick with the results of that poll. And we had actually 88% of the folks that answered the poll, which were most of the people that are involved in the webinar, are 88% do a manual process.
Yeah.
So just so to kind of follow up what you've already said, that's where they're at, where this audience specifically is at.
Yeah, and I really want to stress, and I'm not I'm not pandering, but it's very common. I mean, it's really, and as a matter of fact, we had a call this morning, and large company that are just trying to automate. They need to do more with less people, and they're not getting funds to add staff. So that's a very common very common we're seeing in the market. This next slide that we're going to talk about is customer portfolio risk management. So there's a lot to unpack on this slide, and there's some very simple items here that I want to cover that may seem sort of mundane and cliche, but they're very important. And then there's some more longer term complex ideas around portfolio management, because a lot of people look at individual risk with individual companies, which you have to do. You have to start there. But there's also ways to look at overall portfolio risk, so you understand what your tolerance is for maybe taking on additional risk or maybe minimizing additional risk. So the key to understanding all these on your portfolio is to be able to make decisions make good decisions in the growth times and the good times, but also in the bad times. And I think one last piece before I get into the meat of the slide is, as everybody knows, you can't always judge risk by how people pay you. They may be paying you on time because you're very important to them, but they're not paying others on time. And you need to be able to understand that and where your risk lies within your customers. A couple of the mundane things that you probably think about all the time is, review your portfolio now, especially if any time with what we're going through with COVID-19 and when we come out of it, review your portfolio now. Think about it in terms of who may not be in business in 3 to 6 months. Is there a possibility to mitigate risk now? Can you do things to collect or get money in the door now because you're worried about 3 to 6 months down the road? Manage your portfolio by exception. Most of your all's portfolios are too large to manage every customer individually. So if possible, and with CreditSafe, you can do this, and it can flow through, other systems. Use monitoring tools. Automate. Put automated rule sets in place to notify your analysts when something changes, something significant that says, okay, I need to go look at this customer. There's triggers and criteria that you can put in place to do that. Even if you're doing it manually, you can see it and put it in a spreadsheet, change colors, or any platform that you're using today. Again, external and internal sources of data. Use CreditSafe reports, trade groups, industry contacts, financials, ratings, years in business as far as external sources. Internal sources, sales history, payment history. Talk to the sales guy. All these different components can tell you about the customer. So managing your portfolio ongoing as opposed to just when you're onboarding. And we recommend every 6 months, do a review of your portfolio. Every year, do a review of your portfolio. Score your entire portfolio and take a look at what's changed or what's going on. A lot of people with manual processes see it all the time. And you get a sales guy, he's got an order, they ask for a credit limit, you take a look at the data that you have, you print it off, you make the decision, you put it in a file, and you don't look at it again. So we really want to try to start small, automate, and begin to get you, insights into your customer base. Second part of this slide, which is a little bit more complex and a little bit longer term thinking, and I'll only spend a couple of minutes on it, is segmenting your portfolio by risk. We've got customers that take the time to rank their customers, A customers, B customers, C customers, low, medium, and high risk. Look at the revenue you're getting from those customers. Apply a risk rating to those customers. What's your profit margin on those customers? This allows you to understand your portfolio and are you reserved appropriately based on portfolio risk. Got one client, an anecdote from this is it allows the C-suite to understand, okay, if I'm well reserved on my portfolio and I can tolerate some risk, maybe we'll go into another industry. Maybe we'll go into an industry where these companies are mostly startups, where it's a low dollar risk value, but a high risk customer, but yet it's not going to move the needle that much on my overall risk. So very important to be able to understand your portfolio risk. Then you're actually providing data to your managers in your C-suite that says, okay, we've got enough data here that says it's okay to start to grow the business, or maybe we want to grow it faster. Now, again, as I mentioned, this gets a little bit more complex, but you have all the data. You just have to gather it, get it in one place, and start to analyze it. And the last thing on this slide, Nathan, is I want to talk a little bit about a recent example. We've got just signed up a publicly traded oil and gas service company, a $3 billion company. Had no real process in place to assess the risk of their current portfolio. And you might imagine kind of what they're going through right now with oil and gas. So we brought in AR. We're using AR to score their existing portfolio along with credit safe reporting and some other parameters. And they're starting to get their arms around, okay, who's not going to be here in 3 to 6 months? We really need to attack this portion of our portfolio. So that's the last piece on that slide, but portfolio risk is very important to be able to understand. Couple of slides left. This next one is, part of the kind of the main title of the webinar, and understanding your AR and your DSO. So I think the theme of this slide really needs to be, and what we're hearing in the market is coming out of this downturn. You really need to be prepared to collect. Know your customers, do your homework. AR management now and how you respond to these customers could gain significant loyalty in the future. So if communicate early and communicate often, and you don't want to wait till the recovery starts to really understand what dollars you're going to go after, what piece of the customer base you want to go after. And again, automation. How can we automate this to where you're doing more with less? What collections activities on what segment of your portfolio are you going to go after based on the data you're gathering and the risk of that part of the portfolio? So, if you dig down a little bit deeper on this, understanding the collectability of your customers. What data do you need to know where to go? Okay. Do you want to use the size of the customer? Do you want to use the profitability? Do you want to use the years in business, years a customer, their industry risk rating? And you want to treat all these customers differently. We've got one client that's putting codes now into their collection software around deferrals. Deferring payments to either they're good customers or ones that they really know that are in trouble, that they want to keep as a customer, and they're deferring payments, but they know that they're hurting. And then analyze, again, if you can, look at some of your portfolios, look at your AR, look at who's struggling, who's going to be around in 3 to 6 months, and mitigate that risk now, if possible. And then on the future piece of this slide with regards to DSO, is start thinking about that now. Just like before this downturn, I would assume that most everybody's businesses were pretty good. Everybody was winning. You really weren't. Your DSO was probably pretty good. Maybe not, but in most cases, maybe it was. Your AR was in pretty good standing. But as we know, we didn't know this was coming. So be proactive now and put goals in place on your DSO that are aggressive. Shoot for aggressive DSO goals. That way, you're creating a cushion when something like this happens. So if you've got a 30-day DSO, which is pretty strong, very strong. If it slips 5 to 10 days, you've got a cushion there based on what's going on in the market right now. So understand your AR, understand where your DSO is, understand your customers, and coming out of this, where do you want to collect? Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck from the activities that you're going to put your collectors and your analysts on, which is going to be very important. Automation coming out of COVID-19 is going to be extremely important. Nathan, that's all I had on that one. Couple more here. Business intelligence and reporting. We all ask and get asked for reports. Let me say real quick, obviously starting another polling question, so make sure you look at that and get that answered. So reporting, business intelligence. Yeah, I think one of the things we hear, and which is around the question, is how many systems do you have to go to get the data? Again, you're asked to provide reports, but you may have multiple ERPs. You may have a CRM where you're putting collections notes in. So there's all kinds of different systems that you've got to use, and you really need to understand on how to make sense of this data, because it's going to tell you what to do in the future. So learn from it, act on it, and hopefully it can provide actual insight based on the data you're gathering. And I think we take for granted sometimes how much data we actually have. It's just hard to put it in a format to where we can make sense of it. So business intelligence tools are very important, and they can provide insight into a lot of things, internal and external. From a credit and collections standpoint, you can look at your analyst performance. Are the analysts being productive? Is the activity that they're doing producing results? Are they working on the right accounts? Are they working in the right quadrant? If you've segmented your AR, or if you've segmented your customer base, are they working on the right accounts? Very important. Are they doing the right thing at the right time based on what you're trying to accomplish? And again, on business intelligence for internal, on your credit and collections people, what gets measured gets done. A little bit of oversight there, but you're really just trying to make them efficient as possible. And then of course there's a slew of reports out there that you all get asked for, that we have maybe in our system, that there are in other systems, maybe your ERP, maybe other systems that you're using. You can measure your portfolio performance. How am I stacking up on credit limits versus AR? Is there a way to look at that? How do I really understand? Are they bumping up against their credit limit because they need more, or are they bumping up because they're having trouble paying us? And again, selling more to your best customers. How do you find those diamonds in the rough where they've got good credit, they've got the ability to buy more, but you just don't know who they are? You can spot trends in these accounts, good or bad. You can do cash forecasting based on payment behavior. That's a big report I know people get asked for. Forecast when are we going to get paid? How are we going to get paid? I need to understand my cash flow. Average days to pay, DSO, other metrics that based on the data that you're bringing in and that you're able to report on and provide intelligence on. Bad debt reserve. Spot trends in disputes and promises to pay. If you're recording those, maybe there's a trend. Maybe there's something else you can do to prevent these disputes. If you're actually keeping track of them, you understand why people are disputing invoices. And then again, on the reporting, it should show you ways, or show you the issues you're having, where are your problems, and where can I add automation? If this piece of the puzzle or this piece of the process is taking too long, where can I add automation? It really gets the outliers of where your problems are. And then automate these reports. If the sales guys want to know every week where the credit app is, or who's getting approved and what the credit limit was, build a report for it, automate it, send it to them. There's a lot of ways to be able to automate these, especially the ones that that need to get to these people within the organization. And maybe you export data into another system so there's visibility across the company. And I know that you all are definitely already providing reports and you're doing a lot of this, but that's generally another thing that we hear, and everybody asks about reporting every time we talk to them. So make the data useful. You're gathering a lot of data. As far as
just to give you with that little break there, give me 1 second. Just the polling here again. You have again, most people responded, which is great. The biggest segment of our folks here that are in attendance pull from 2 to 3 different reporting sources. That's about 65% of them. The rest of them pretty much pull from 0 to 1. So I'm guessing 1 rather than 0. And then we do have somebody that's pulling from 4 or more sources as well. But it seems like everybody's kind of doing 1 to 3 sources rather than more than that.
Yeah, that's something we see regularly. And in a perfect world, all your data resides in the same system you're reporting out of. But as we know, the companies that are on this webinar and the companies in general out there, they're doing acquisitions, they're selling off people, they're bringing in other business units. So from an integration perspective, it's generally very difficult to get all the data in one place, and that's something that people can help with. Excuse me. So I'm going to kind of get to a point here where I'm wrapping up and kind of do some summary here, and hopefully some of these ideas that I've discussed increase the probability of you onboarding your customers a lot smarter, minimizing risk, and then managing DSO, both in good times and bad times. And again, when you're winning and business is good, sometimes you don't look at the things you need to look at. But I think I've covered a lot of things here that are important to review, both good and bad times. Couple of bullet points here on that I think are important takeaways is understanding your customer base, either through automation, communication, data gathering for scoring is critical to success. And then that provides insight into your risk profile. And that's something that the C-suite really wants to understand. Really on a future basis, what's my risk of getting paid? And where can I go for future revenue growth? I may not want to go to this industry. This is a high risk, but I want to sell more to this industry. And then make the analysis important to as many people as possible. In the company, we hear a lot about visibility. Well, this team wants this piece, or the sales guy wants to know this. So as much as you can, make this data visible. And I think the last 2 pieces here are be proactive and put processes in place. Start somewhere. You hear that in life in general, is start somewhere. Automated online credit application is a great place to start. Automate your onboarding. Spend less time so then your analysts can maybe go look at troubled accounts from a collections perspective. So start somewhere and try to understand your portfolio and see if you can get started on some of these value-added ideas and components in the order to cash space. So hopefully this was valuable information, and I know that we're bumping up against the time, and I just wanted to turn it back over to Nathan and see about some Q&A.
Absolutely, John. No problem there. If you're looking at your screen, John's information is up. So if you'd like to reach out directly to him, it's there. It will also be linked to his stuff in the email you'll receive after this. That'll also have the recording of this webinar with it. But we do have a couple of questions here. One is you talked about communication here, John, earlier in the webinar. What should a company be communicating right now if little to no business is actually happening? So if there's not much going on with their company or the companies they're talking to, what should they be doing? Like, what should they be communicating?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it's hard to do. I even struggle with it with our customers. But I think the most important thing is, communicate with them to find out what's going on. Are they struggling? I would assume that the folks on this webinar are either, onboarding and on the credit side or on the collection side. And I think it's reach out early and often, because people are going to remember that. Even if you don't like the answer, you might be able to start to develop plans with you and your team and management to work with these folks, because AR is getting pushed out as we speak. You may not, there's a little bit of a lag here, but I think you got to find a mechanism by which your analysts, your salespeople, your collectors, are reaching out and reach out early enough, and they'll remember that, in the good times, about sticking with you.
Gotcha. Great stuff. 2 more questions here. And if anybody has any more, please feel free to send them through. What would you qualify as an aggressive DSO goal? I know you were talking about the DSO goals, but what would you qualify as an aggressive one?
That's a great question. And I'm probably not the aficionado on DSO. I'd love to, would have been probably really smart to have a poll question about average DSO. I think 30 is extremely aggressive. But whatever it is today, I can say this, whatever it is today, set a goal to be pretty, maybe 10 to 20% more aggressive than that. And then what do you need to do to get there? But I think, obviously we probably there's a lot of people on this call, they're DSO in the 60 to 70 range.
Yeah, we're actually getting a couple of people saying 30, 35 days, a couple of different things. So yeah, like I think we you seem to be right on the mark there, but you're saying, maybe a 5 to 10% decrease in wherever you're at, unless you're maybe at that really aggressive thing is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. And then this one's kind of an open-ended question. So I don't envy your position in this one, but how do you think the payment forecasting and the money's forecasting is going to change going forward as we get back to business?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing is you really have to look into your customer base to try to understand that. The unfortunate thing is everyone on this phone, me included, if they haven't called you yet, or if you haven't talked to them, you're not going to know, and you're just not. Right. You're going to know by time going by. I think it's not going to be good. Right. To be honest with you. Now, having said that, I think the bounce back is going to be really good. We've got probably, I won't tell you how many people are in the pipeline, but those people aren't going away right now that are in our sales pipeline. They're just saying, I can't write a check right now. So this information and these ideas, whether you buy something or you do it yourself, are important, and you need to implement them now, because there's going to be another downturn. But coming out of it, I think it could be really good, and there could be a nice boomerang effect.
Right. Well, John, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your insights and all that you've added in here. We do have a couple of folks just adding on to that last question, just saying, the hardest hit areas regionally and industry wise are probably going to be pretty rough, which does make sense. And I'm going to just do an absolute shameless plug, because I work for CreditSafe and it's our webinar, so we can, our COVID-19 impact score. I can't talk to you folks enough about that, about how helpful that can be in helping to predict those areas, those particular businesses, those industries, all those different things that could be most highly affected. If you're already a customer, talk to your account rep, and you can get those scores, no problem. It is an extra thing. It is not something we're charging you for. It's completely complimentary. And if you're not one of our customers and you're on this webinar, then join up on our Stay Safe program. Again, completely complimentary, no charges for that, and you'll get the COVID scores as well during that. You can find both those on our website, no problem. John, again, thank you so much. Folks know how to contact you. Here's our information on the screen right now for CreditSafe if you want to do that. And please feel free to register for other webinars and join us next week. Tuesday, May 5th is our next webinar at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be talking about Analysis 2.0, the way that you can analyze your customer portfolios and all the different things going on there with our 3D Ledger project and our product rather. And one of our premier account sales managers, Scott Garger, will be joining us for that and be our presenter. But on behalf of CreditSafe, I want to say thank you for joining us, and thank you, John, and everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.